everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown Podcast. I am your co-host, Brian Bosarge, and as always, my co-host, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, 28 days, 22 hours, 59 minutes, 17 seconds away from the 2022 NFL Draft.
We are in that coming into April time of a lull in draft talk. We have some pro days obviously happening, but at this point, I feel like this is when I just started holding my breath. Like, can it be next week? Can we just get this done? Can we just have it happen? I'm kind of ready and eager. So it's coming up though. We're heading into the month of the draft here pretty soon.
4 weeks away from tomorrow night. We will be on the air live streaming here on the YouTube channel. Shane, I had a banner here make up. Did anything happen this week? Because this, after we've been hot and heavy trades and free agency and everything these last 3 weeks, we've always had something big to talk about. This week, we really didn't have nothing to talk about until about 15 minutes ago. And Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Bruce Arians, he's done. Hanging it up. Todd Bowles promoted to head coach from defensive coordinator. Shane couldn't have a peaceful week, I guess.
Look, it's got to be something. This offseason's been crazy. And being here in Pittsburgh, I know that Bruce Arians often he doesn't have a timeline for things. He'll do things when he feels them. And he felt like retiring, moving to the front office, then here we go. So, interesting that Todd Bowles, who has previous head coaching experience, gets the nod. Bruce Arians will still be around. I don't think it's going to change much for what the Buccaneers do, especially with Tom Brady being back, but really interesting.
The sentiment on the internets here is that Arians and Brady maybe not getting along so much, and that's why this happened now when it did. I don't know if there's any substance to that or not.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, if that was the case, I don't think Tom Brady comes back. Right? Like I don't think this was a prerequisite to that, or this would have happened sooner. So it just seems like a bunch of fluff to me. I don't know, obviously, but we'll see.
About as much fluff as that Tom Brady's getting traded to Miami crap that's been happening for like 3 days now.
Exactly.
All right, Shane, we got a heavy hitter to come on tonight to talk about the draft. We're going to bring him in now from CBS Sports NFL draft coverage, Josh Edwards. Josh, man, thanks for coming on tonight.
Of course, guys. Thanks for having me. You kind of set me up to fail there by calling me a heavy hitter, but I'll try to live up to that.
Hey, man. Don't be afraid to brag on this here podcast, sir. Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, no, I'll say thanks for coming on. I reached out to Josh. I appreciate you coming on, man. So kind of give a little rundown, your background, what you do over at CBS, and where people can find you, and then we'll dig in here.
Yeah, I think the way that you kind of fall into the draft, just like anybody else, you grow up watching the draft. I mean, it's an event all in of itself. Growing up a Browns fan, that was kind of the one thing that you had to look for each year. So the draft was always huge for me. Kept taking opportunity after opportunity, and CBS gave me an opportunity to do this full time, and it's been a blessing. I think I've been doing this now for 3 years, so still learning my process, each and every year, but it's been a blast, man. I think, at the end of the day, you just try to have fun with it and realize that even the people that get paid millions of dollars are right and wrong from time to time. So you just got to have fun with it. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this on our show before. Like last year, Josh Norris had 16 of the 32 first-round picks, and that like obliterated the record. So it just goes to show you what we do like every week. And it's like, well, if you get, I don't know, a third of the first-round picks right, you are awesome at this.
I mean, it's absurd. I mean, you talk about batting averages in baseball. Batting 300 is a good number. If you're batting 500 in the NFL when it comes to your draft picks, I mean, you're going to have a job for a long time. It's tough to bat 500 in first-round draft picks alone. So that's why we see so much turnover in the NFL. That's why, some of the teams, some of the moves that we've seen made this offseason, all of the aggressive moves the teams are taking to build a more competitive roster, they're doing that because they feel the pressure of having to compete when you have a roster that is capable of competing. So it's been exciting. I mean, this is an offseason unlike anything that I can ever remember. Coming onto this, I thought it was going to be an ordinary night, and then, as you mentioned off the top, having the Bruce Arians news, it's a year-round sport. I mean, it truly dominates the headlines even after the Super Bowl.
Well, let me ask you, Josh, we've had a lot of that movement this offseason. A lot of it's centered around the quarterback position. Kind of talk about how you evaluate this quarterback class in this draft. There seems to be some very different takes on the level of talent here. Are we going to have two go in the top 10? Are they going to fall, much further? Is there even a franchise quarterback here? What's kind of your take and your personal view of this class? And then how do you think the NFL was going to view them in terms of, draft position?
Well, when you look at the NFL, it's clear what teams are prioritizing right now. The guys like Josh Allen, the guys like Patrick Mahomes that, have some mobility and can create off platform, push the ball downfield, all that kind of stuff. You have to have one of those guys to feel like you have a chance to contend in today's NFL. So I look at this quarterback class. I think Malik Willis is probably the only one that has the possibility to get to that point. But you have to consider he's such a raw passer. He has a lot of room to improve in terms of his processing, in general, his pocket awareness. Whereas, Kenny Pickett might be a little more farther developed. Desmond Ridder may be a little more farther developed in that category, but, they have their deficiencies themselves. So when you look at this quarterback class, like a Kenny Pickett, a Sam Howell, like they are good players that are probably, day two any other year. The fact that it's such a quarterback needy year, or a league rather, means that these guys are probably going to be taken in the first round, and it just creates unrealistic expectations relative to their talent. I mean, Daniel Jones, he was a great player in college. I mean, he was a good prospect coming out, but when you're taking number 6 overall, it totally changes how fans view you and what their expectations are for you. So he has not lived up to the number 6 overall expectations, but he's been a good player at the same time. That's a team that has been working itself through, its own deficiencies. That's what we're going to see this year. There's a lot of guys that are probably day 2 type talents. I don't think any of them are your, elite franchise type quarterbacks that are even going to have a first round grade for me. I don't have a first round grade on any of these guys. But I think Malik Willis probably has the highest upside. And everybody keeps saying, look what Josh Allen did. Well, Josh Allen was quite an anomaly. I mean, you typically cannot improve your accuracy the way that he has improved it. So there's a gamble in taking any one of these guys. I think you have to be aware of where your team is right now, and the decisions that you're going to make, because a team like Carolina, they're so far away in terms of their roster right now. If you throw a quarterback into the mix, that player is not going to just lead you to the playoffs or a Super Bowl. It's just not realistic. And those are the kind of desperate moves that are ultimately going to get people fired. So I think you have to have some self-awareness as you approach the draft process.
Josh, I want to talk about the first overall pick here in Jacksonville. And any other year, I think they're selling this pick. If there was a quarterback in this class, they're getting that crazy Jared Goff bounty that the Rams gave up for a few years ago, and maybe even the one like Trey Lance and all that. But that's not going to happen this year. I don't know that they can move out of that pick, even if they wanted to. So let's just presume that they're stuck there. Is it Aiden Hutchinson or is it Trayvon Walker as a guy who's, now you're seeing mock number 1? Is it Kayvon Thibodeau? I doubt it anymore. Is it one of the tackles? I mean, there's the intrigue there because, nothing's really set. Yeah.
For me, I would still take Alabama offensive tackle Evan Neal. I think he's just a rare specimen at the offensive tackle position, specifically as it relates to this exact class. I don't think there's a clear number 1 overall prospect the way that we've seen in years past. And like you said, the lack of a top quarterback talent is just simply going to dry up the trade market. I mean, there's not going to be teams that are willing to give up the type of trades that we've seen with Jared Goff and Carson Wentz and, those guys in the past. It's just simply not going to happen. Now, could you move down and maybe take less compensation to do so? There might be some of those opportunities available. I think, when you look at a team like the Steelers, they might be motivated to trade up and get one of those quarterbacks. You look at a team like Kansas City that now has 2 first-round picks. Maybe they are willing to move up and get one of those better wide receivers. There's going to be trades that happen, but it's not going to be to the same extent as we've seen in years past. So when I look at Jacksonville specifically, I would personally take Evan Neal because I think he's a better tackle prospect than what you have in Cam Robinson right now. You're not really locked into him at this point because you could rescind the franchise tag on him or, have him sign the deal and trade him. There's plenty of teams that need offensive linemen in today's NFL. I mean, you would find a suitor. You might have to take on a little bit of that salary, but you will find a suitor and you will probably get some draft assets in return. At the same time, Neal, as well as Cam Robinson, have the flexibility to play offensive guard or they could play right tackle. I mean, all kind of options are on the table. So as I'm looking at a team that has Trevor Lawrence, a franchise quarterback to build around, I'm taking Evan Neal because I think he is the best option for this team right now. But as the winds are blowing, it seems like it's in the direction of Aiden Hutchinson. I think that's probably the most reasonable bet if you're going to place one at this point in time.
Let me ask you kind of a general question for us draft guys. We spend all this time through the college season watching film and developing grades on these players. And then, when we get to this point, we have the combine, we have these pro days, we're getting 40 times, we're getting some of the agility drills, explosive drills. How do you weigh the athleticism and what those workouts say versus kind of your film grades? What happens when things don't match up? I always like to hear, people that do this and do a really good job of it. Like, it's still something I'm working on, trying to find that balance. How do you kind of balance those two things in how you evaluate a player?
Yeah, I think that's, a very good question. It's still something that I'm working on myself. You have to trust the tape at the end of the day, what you're seeing, because, if you're seeing a guy that runs a 4.5 at the NFL Combine track down a guy that runs a 4.4 on the field, something's not adding up right there. So you have to trust your eyes in some regards. But I think there are times where we place too much emphasis on the NFL Combine and testing in general, because if you are running a 4.4, that's straight line speed. If you cannot change directions, that's not going to be of much use to you in the NFL. So it's all part of a puzzle that you kind of have to put together. And at the end of the day, it's all about the tape. So when you have some of those outliers, some of those numbers that catch you off guard, or maybe you didn't expect coming out of their testing, maybe that's something that you go back to the tape and you say, was I looking at it wrong? Like, was I feeling sick that day? There's so many things. You look through a lens any given day, your attitude, all this kind of stuff can have an impact on what you're looking at. So you want to go back and make sure that you are seeing things clearly. And I think, a lot of times when you look at a guy like Trayvon Walker, a guy that is just physically gifted, the numbers that he put up at the NFL Combine, you're saying, why was this guy not more productive in college? And then you look at the film, and Georgia just does not ask their guys to work vertically that often. I mean, they value working those stunts and creating chaos for the other offensive line and forcing them to communicate on the fly. That's what they value. So some players are just not in a good position in college. And then as it relates to pro days, we talk about quarterback pro days every given year. And there's just like nothing to take from it whatsoever, because they're out there throwing in shorts. You don't have a helmet on. You're not being blitzed. You've got one route that you're trying to throw, typically in your indoor facility. There's just not much to take from that. So at the end of the day, I think you do have to trust the tape, but there's certainly some testing examples that have you going back to look at the tape and make sure you're seeing things clearly.
Yeah, I'm with. I can't believe that you weren't impressed with those air throws by Howell and Willis these last couple of days.
Yeah.
Josh, I'm going to
Mike
ask you.
Tomlin certainly was. He was cracking a smile everywhere we saw him. So, somebody was taking something out of it.
Mike Tomlin this is like the worst, either this is the biggest smokescreen ever, or dude it's like he's about to single white female Malik Willis if the Steelers don't draft this guy, man. It's bad news. I've asked this question pretty much we've had fantasy guys on this show. We've had other guys on this show. I'm going to ask this. I have all 5 wide receivers, one like right next to each other on my board. I can't break this cluster. So I want you to break this wide receiver cluster of what we are calling the big 5 wide receivers, and maybe somebody else is in there for you.
Yeah, so I just updated him recently because I was going position by position. So I've got Garrett Wilson as the top wide receiver. Just to me, he's been the most consistent, a guy with, tremendous body control, the way that he is able to adjust in the air. He's got great field awareness, everything that you would hope to have at the position. I think Garrett Wilson possesses that. Great speed, as we saw at the NFL Combine, that checks out. A guy that, can make plays after the catch. It's not his strength when you consider some of the other stuff I've talked about, but he's got the capability of doing that. Number 2 wide receiver for me is still Jamison Williams. And I think before his injury, he was trending towards that top spot because the speed, his ability to work on a vertical plane, that's what you're looking for in today's NFL, his ability to work after the catch. Again, I think, with today's NFL in the current landscape, teams are valuing that. They want to get the ball to players in space and allow them to work after the catch. And I think Jamison Williams was one of the most effective in doing so in college football last year before the injury. Number 3 for me is still Treylon Burks, despite his poor combine testing. I mean, that's a great example of having to trust the tape, because when you watch him, I mean, he plays faster than that 4.5 that we saw at the NFL Combine. I think he's great working on a vertical plane. We talk about his exposure working out of the slot during college, but he's a guy that I thought had the most success working vertically. I mean, he has great size. He's got great speed. If you try to jam him at the line of scrimmage, he can bowl over you. He's got the speed to get around you, if you try to play off of him. So, he's just an incredibly difficult mismatch for opposing cornerbacks. Number 4, I've got Chris Olave, a guy that was just very consistent. He's not a guy that is going to so much attack the ball at the catch point, but he had tremendous red zone production for Ohio State, a guy that, is just going to be where you need him to be, somebody that you can rely on any given snap, a guy that, you can just trust to go out there and do his job. I think that is very valuable for NFL teams. They want a guy that's going to be able to take the coaching and translate that to the field, and that's exactly who Chris Olave is. And then number 5 is Drake London. I mean, it's kind of cookie cutter, I guess, with my top 5, because that's pretty much how everybody else, those same 5 is how everybody else has them stacked up. But Drake London, actually, no, wait. Sorry, I've got George Pickens as my 5th wide receiver. Drake London is a little bit below that. George Pickens, I think, has just shown the ability to be a number 1 wide receiver in the past. Obviously, we didn't get to see that this past season with his injury. He made a few splash plays down the stretch for that Georgia team, but we really had to go back a couple of years to see what he's capable of. And I think when you look at this class, George Pickens is a guy that has that number 1 potential. And then you have Drake London, who, again, everybody talks about his ability to create separation, but there's multiple ways to create separation. And Drake London is a guy that has a basketball background, and he knows how to use it on the football field. I mean, he uses his body incredibly well to not only create separation, but to win at the catch point. And that's kind of where he's going to make his money at the next level. So those 6 are still there for me. Wilson and Williams are both in the top 10 for me right now, just because I value that so much, their ability to work after the catch. And then those other guys are all within the top 32 prospects as well. So you're talking about a very deep wide receiver class.
I didn't hear the name Christian Watson there. You've angered Shane.
He's my number 6, but I could take George Pickens is fine. I'll be on the island with the Christian Watson who's been moving up.
Yeah, I mean the thing with Watson, obviously he had a fantastic combine. The tape was a little bit lacking to me, but part of that is because North Dakota State is just kind of a run-heavy offense. He doesn't have the same route tree and exposure as some of these other guys. So when you're talking about wide receivers that maybe have the most upside, Christian Watson's probably in that next group. When we're talking about guys that could develop into a number 1 type wide receiver, although he's not graded out that way for me right now, Christian Watson is the guy that has the profile to become that type of player.
Yeah, I think it's tough with those guys that like you said before, the offense doesn't use them in the way that the NFL is going to. There's definitely a lot of tight ends that I feel that way about. Yeah. Let me ask you about just doing mock drafts. Who is the hardest team to make a pick for in your mock draft right now, and what kind of options or thought process do you go through with them right at this moment?
Yeah, I want to say it's crazy, but the teams that have the most needs seem to be the ones that give me the most trouble. Tampa Bay was there for me before until they created a couple needs this offseason. But the teams that have a lot of needs are still, you kind of overthink it, I guess, at times. So Houston for me is a team that, I can sit here and I can make an argument for 10 different players, in terms of who they should select. Even more so now that they've got number 13 as well. So that's difficult. In recent mock drafts, I've had them taking offensive linemen. I've had them taking edge rushers. I've had them taking cornerbacks. And we do at CBS, we do a weekly mock draft and have been since the fall. So, I have been playing around with it quite a bit and mixing those guys up. And unfortunately, now it's getting to the point where, I kind of have to put my money where my mouth is and actually make some projections as to who I think they're going to take, as opposed to maybe what I would do in certain situations. So I would say Houston is probably a team that I've struggled with just because they have so many needs. I know some people would look at it as, well, you can't really go wrong because they could use just about anything. But I think the reality is you try to go through all of these scenarios and try to figure out what makes the most sense for Houston. So they're probably one of the teams that I've probably struggled with, especially more so now that I'm having to deal with them in the middle of the first round as well.
So your Twitter bio also says you write a little bit for about Kentucky football. So I figured I would bring them up. Who are some of the guys that we should be watching out for from UK here? Maybe I'm not sure how many of these guys are going to hear their name on the first couple of days, but who are some of the guys that we need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so Darian Kennard is a guy that a lot of draft fans are probably familiar with at this point in time. A guy that has played offensive tackle for Kentucky, but I still think he projects to a guard at the next level. He'll almost certainly go on day 2 somewhere, just because of his tenacious run blocking capabilities. I think he's more polished than a lot of the guys that you'll have in that range on day 2. Wan'Dale Robinson is a tremendous after the catch wide receiver. The issue with him is he has shorter arms, and that seems silly to talk about, but when you're in the NFL, you have much tighter windows, and as a quarterback, that gives you a much more limited range in the way that you can get the ball to him. So as much as I love his ability after the catch, that's going to be taken into consideration for a lot of teams. So I think there's a chance he goes on day 2. At the worst, probably early day 3. Center Luke Fortner is a guy that has guard center flexibility. He's played both throughout his career at Kentucky. Tremendously smart guy. I mean, he's got a couple of degrees to his name. He's including an engineering degree. So I think for teams that are looking for, a player that is maybe your 6th or your 7th lineman, I know, he could probably start for a lot of teams, but at worst, he's a guy that can step in and actually give you some versatility at that spot. Marquand McCall is a nose tackle that was playing in the shadows of Quentin Bohanna, who was taken by the Dallas Cowboys last year. I think McCall is a better player than Bahana when he came out of college. So, to me, I think he's probably a mid-day 3 type pick. Those are probably the most recognizable names at this point. Dari Rosenthal is an offensive tackle, transferred from LSU, is incredibly athletic, has done fairly well in testing so far. He was the fastest offensive lineman at the NFL Combine. Maybe it's a Sadiq Charles situation where you bank on that kind of a talent and you're willing to take him on day 3 in the hopes that he does develop into an everyday contributor for you. I know that's what Washington has gotten from Charles. I think Charles has slid inside and plays guard now, but you see that same kind of upside from Dari Rosenthal. So a lot of talent on that Kentucky team, to be honest. Mark Stoops has done a great job with the program in recent years, and they've been pretty present in the NFL draft process.
So Josh, just give me a couple of your guys, like day 3 guys that you think are going to outperform their draft position, some of your kind of favorite sleepers, day 3 picks that people should be a little more excited about or maybe deserve a little more buzz, however you want to quantify that.
Yeah, Florida State running back Jashawn Corbin is a guy that I've come to be, pretty high on through the process. A guy that I think, when you look back at what Florida State has been traditionally, the running backs that have come out of there, they have not necessarily benefited from having a great offensive line. And I think the same is true of Corbin. I think he's a guy that has been able to create opportunities for himself. I think he's capable as a pass catcher. I think he can stand in pass protection. Although I would say that's probably the weakest of the 3 areas of his game. But I think he's a guy that has starting potential, for a team in the NFL. He's probably going to come in, early day 3 somewhere, be a backup, and could eventually, rise into a starting role. Minnesota edge rusher Boye Mafe, I know, is not a day 3 guy anymore. And probably never was. I think he was my 57th prospect coming into the year, and he's only gotten better. I mean, this is a guy that has been around the edge. He's a guy that has the capability of dropping into coverage. He can seal the corner. I mean, he can do everything. I think he's undersold a little bit in what he's capable of doing. Minnesota used him a bit more like a rotational player, and they took him off the field in run-down situations. I don't think they needed to do that. I think in the opportunities that he had to show that he could hold up there, I think he more than held his own. So Boye Mafe is another one. And then Danny Gray, wide receiver from SMU. I mean, he's a little bit slight in frame, but a guy that makes plays after the catch and just has been really solid throughout his career. So I think those are probably, 2 guys on day 3, certainly, that have caught my eye, and I'm probably a little higher on than most.
Gray was one of the fastest guys on the field at the Senior Bowl practices. That's a good call. All right, last question, Josh, and we'll let you get out of here. We're gonna have I'm gonna have a little fun with this one. I didn't even have this written down, but I just thought of this. Everybody does this on late as we've been watching day 3 of the draft. We're all getting tired, and everybody asks this question. We're gonna ask it now, 4 weeks before the draft. Josh, who's gonna be Mr. Irrelevant?
Oh, wow. Who's going to be Mr. Irrelevant?
Man, what a question.
I can tell you exactly who it is on my board right now. That might be a quick out.
That's all we need.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
Let's see. That would be, looks like Armani Rogers, who is a former quarterback at Ohio University that is transferred to the tight end position. So you can't find tight end tape on him. He's had some all-star game showings that has performed well, but not a lot of tape out there on Armani Rogers as a tight end prospect.
We've talked about him here on the podcast. I'm intrigued, and I would definitely take him on day 3 all day long, just because of the speed and the tools to work with. So you heard it here, everybody. If Armani Rogers is Mr. Irrelevant, we're going to call back to this during our live stream for sure on day 3 of the draft.
It's totally coincidence, by the way. I actually went to Ohio University. That's what this flag is over my shoulder. So Happened to work out that way, but it doesn't hurt to give a little bit of extra love to the Bobcats.
Josh, man, we appreciate you taking the time and
Yeah.
coming on with us tonight, man.
Of course, guys, anytime.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where they can follow you and find your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at EdwardsCBS. You can also follow my work at cbssports.com. We'll have strengths and weaknesses on each of these prospects as we get closer to the draft. We each put out our individual draft boards, position rankings, all that good stuff. And then, as I said earlier in the podcast, weekly mock drafts. So if you get a little bored, you can always come to cbssports.com and find a fresh mock draft.
It's good stuff, man. It's one of my go-to sites for the NFL draft. Josh, man, again, thanks a lot for coming on.
Of course, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
That was Josh Edwards, CBS Sports. Shane, that was good stuff right there, man.
Yeah, look, he knows the stuff. I've been following him for a little while and reached out, and I'm glad that he was able to come on. So definitely a guy that watches film. I think it's evident from his writing. So if you haven't, for whatever reason, found your way watching us and haven't gone to CBS to check out his stuff, it's well worth it for sure.
Absolutely. That is definitely probably my favorite draft resource to go to after Draft Countdown, of course.
Oh, of course. Right. That's first and foremost on the bookmark list there.
Of course. We talked a little bit about it, Shane. We're gonna shift back into some stuff, and we talked about it a little bit with Josh there, but we've seen some trends here developing in the last week, and we touched on it briefly. Trayvon Walker. Why has he all of a sudden gone from what was at one point a late first round pick to now almost ostensibly not going to be drafted any lower than second?
Look, I think the reason is that this was his first year starting. And I think that is always a barrier to feeling good about having a guy at the top of the draft, right? Because we've talked about Kayvon Thibodeau. Even Aiden Hutchinson was a first round prospect before this season. We've talked about Evan Neal. Most of these players have been at least on the radar. So when they play really well and you move them up, because that's what we do, we move guys up. Trayvon Walker wasn't, because he wasn't a starter at Georgia where they had a ton of talent. He was getting kind of spot play. And so even when he plays exceptional this season, he's still raw. Is he actually that legitimate of a prospect to be a top player? So he starts to maybe creep into the second day, then late first day. And then it's like, what? NFL teams are talking him up. He's more toolsy than the top edge rushers in this draft. Yeah, he could be at the top. So I think that's why it happens kind of late, and why, as we always say, I feel like as an internet kind of community, usually a step behind the NFL, right? People are figuring that out. I think this is definitely one of those places where, by the end of the national championship, NFL teams probably knew he was a pretty high prospect, and we're kind of catching up and cleaning that up at this point.
You briefly touched on, the rise of Trayvon Walker has almost coincided with the fall of Kayvon Thibodeau, and I don't get it myself. I still have him as the number one prospect in this class, although he's gonna, at this point, it would be a colossal shock if he was that top player drafted now. At this point, man, where do you think his floor is?
Ooh, that's not a pretty sight. I think what his floor is. I think it is not great. I think floor wise, I would be.
I mean, draft capital specifically.
Draft. I don't think it's good. I think 15. I mean, I think he's going to go in the top half of the first, but I don't think anything's guaranteed above that. Do I think he's going to go top 10? I do. I feel like, you're the Jets at 10, or you're sitting there at 9 at Seattle, you probably take him. But I think there's a possibility that he falls a lot further than we think. Maybe it's the medical. He obviously didn't play most of the season due to injury, which I think is a big part of this. And I think there's some teams he's just not going to fit for. Those two things combined, the medical's always the scary part. And we've heard maybe teams have what I think are some dumb concerns about his love of the game or whatever. I think it's probably BS, but any of those things could drop him. I feel pretty confident he'll be a top 15 pick, but that's a far cry from number 1 overall.
So are we looking at a possibility that he maybe even goes behind not just like Hutchinson and Walker, but maybe even behind Karlaftis and Jermaine Johnson?
I'll have my 7-round mock coming out Monday, and right now I'm planning for Thibodeau to be the 4th edge player off the board in that draft. And so I think he'll go above Karlaftis. I would say it's 50-50 to me if Jermaine Johnson goes above him at this point.
Wow. I don't know if I should be concerned, Shane, but anybody listening or watching this in the Mobile, Alabama area, but my little weather bug on my computer just went from rain coming to flood, and I got a little scared.
Look out. You're going to start floating away here.
Look out. Look out. Now I lost my train of thought. Last thing on the trends here, buy or sell Malik Willis number 2 to Detroit.
I mean, it's a sell for me. I don't get it. Do I think there's no chance? I'll never say that. I'll never say that in the NFL draft. But like we just talked about with Josh, I mean, this quarterback class isn't great. And so if you're picking number 2 overall, are you really taking a quarterback? Once again, I think it's just people will feel like quarterbacks need to go there because we've seen Daniel Jones get pushed up. But I think there's so much more evidence of quarterbacks that aren't first round, talents being talked about as higher than they'll go. I mean, we've had Davis Mills, from Jimmy Clausen to Davis Mills, be talked about as first round picks, right? It go rounds later. I think Malik Willis is going to go in the top 20, but 2 just seems overkill, especially when you're Detroit and you're going to sit there at 32. You can trade up if you really want Malik Willis. You don't need to take him at 2. And if you like other players at 32, you can still get the 5th-year option on a Matt Corral and a Sam Howell and a Desmond Ridder, probably. Why do you do that? I just think I'm still not going to have a quarterback in my top 15 in my mock. I still think it's overblown. Like, Carolina at 6 makes me nervous just because they're just wild. But after them, I don't think it's going to happen.
In my 1-round mock I posted on Monday, I had the first quarterback off the board was Malik Willis, but was 20 to Pittsburgh. And the only other quarterback I had go in the first round was Kenny Pickett, and that was 32 to Detroit. So that's kind of where I'm at with this quarterback class. But yeah, so we'll have to see where these quarterbacks fall when your 7-round mock draft comes out on Monday. The 2 more, is that it for you? I'm trying.
Three
more. I can't remember. We may have 3 more.
It feels like I should have 5 more, but right, that's just not going to happen. Yeah, it looks like I have this one, penultimate one, and then the final ones. Yeah.
So 3 more before for you here, Shane. So we'll move on from that. I just kind of wanted to touch on that, and now we're going to move on to this week's edition of Pro Days, and I want to start with Notre Dame. Had theirs, and Kyle Hamilton still didn't run fast. Matter of fact, may have ran slower at his pro day. But Kyron Williams, he did well at what you said he would do well at, and that's the shuttles. So does this he's still day 3, right? Even with this?
Yeah, I think he's day 3. And but I think he's one of those players that can go day 3 and be better than where he's drafted. So on my comps, I have his comp is Dion Lewis as a prospect, who's another, later picked player who had some success because he was super agile, could make guys miss in space. I think it's what Kyron Williams can do. So I would be really surprised if he goes third round, but I think fourth, fifth, sixth is probably where he falls with that. Just short and slow, light and slow. It's really tough to make that commitment.
Speaking of slow, from Purdue's pro day, David Bell still slow. And this is upsetting for a guy who is very as productive as he was. It's not good.
I mean, it's so hard to evaluate him because the tape is really good. Like, he is putting up numbers against good corners and making contested catches. But like, when I look at my kind of scouting report on him, the problems that he has are exacerbated if he is this slow. And it's not even the 40 time. I mean, he ran what at this pro day was an unofficial like 4.7 or something, which he ran a little bit faster at the combine.
I'll say he went 4.65 at the combine.
Yeah, like, seems to be a common theme. The combine maybe have the fastest track of for a lot of these. The almost worse is the agility drills were just awful at the comp. So if his 10-yard split was pretty good, so we want to say, okay, maybe he can get off the line, get up to speed a little quicker. But like, if he can't separate, we've seen that be a problem. I still think he'll be in my top 100. But I guess close. He could definitely fall out of there. When we get closer to the draft, as I start really considering this. But I think at this point he's on the fringe of day 2.
I thought of a cautionary tale for him. Was a receiver from a few years ago, Hakeem Butler from Iowa State, was another contested catch guy that I think draft Twitter really loved, and then he was slow. And he got drafted in the 4th round, and it ain't gone well for Hakeem Butler in the NFL.
I'll say same draft. The guy I liked was Calvin Harmon, if you remember him from
NC State.
Same deal, right? Just like
drafted in the 7th round. Yeah,
drafted because he couldn't separate, and David Bell can't separate. He never could. He didn't have to. What do you do with that? Is the question. It's just I just don't know.
David Bell's teammate George Karlaftis did a good today. 4.7, 7, I think, at his 40, yeah. But which his athletic, so that put a cherry on his athletic testing Sunday there. George Karlaftis, I had going 7th overall in my mock draft to the Giants with their 2nd pick. I think he has top 10 potential, at worst, probably top 15.
Oh, interesting. I grade him out there. I think he could go late round 1. It seems like maybe there's a question of what does he play? Like, what do you do with him? I think he's one of those tweeners that some teams may just not really want to deal with. But I do feel like after the top 4 edge guys, I mean, are you really going to take anyone else?
Right.
So that is tough. I mean, I'm struggling where to put him in this mock draft. It could be late round 1. It could be, like you said, top 15. He's going to be one of those players I'm definitely going to get wrong when I find him. I'm going to have a completely wrong place no matter what I do.
I thought a perfect spot for him was 13 to Cleveland, but they don't have that pick anymore. So that's not really a thing now. One more guy before we start talking about guys that snuck up on us this week. Trey McBride, pro day at Colorado State today, 4.53 40 reported by Jim Nagy from several scouts. That's pretty damn good for a guy his size at tight end. Probably cements him at tight end 1, I believe, and potentially first round pick.
I think it's possible. Your Bengals picking at 31 now. Put him through the drills there, and I think there's such a chasm between him and the rest of this tight end class. Like, I did not think he was that fast. He probably isn't, but ultimately I felt like, okay, maybe he's a 4.65, 4.7 guy. It still kind of puts him in that mix with Jalen Weidermeyer horrendous showing we talked about last week. But man, I mean, this really puts him, I think, on another plane. His whole testing was pretty good. I think, 31 just is a nice, comfortable spot with a really big hole on the Bengals that could add not just a pass catcher, but a blocker. I mean, he's a good blocking tight end too. He can do both.
He would give them some options there because he would be the athletic tight end that they don't have. Hayden Hurst is now the I can't block, but I can catch tight end. And Drew Sample is the I can't catch, but I can block tight end. So that would give their tight end room, but it would give Joe Burrow that guy that he's not had in his first 2 years. No offense to CJ Uzama, but Trey McBride there. Anybody jump out to you, Shane? I have a sneaky guy who I'd never heard of that jumped out to me this week when I was filling out the old spreadsheet. Anybody stick out to you this week from the pro days?
I don't think I think we hit on most of the ones that I was kind of eyeing up that happened this week. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I think it was this week. Martin Emerson, the corner from Mississippi State, was one that kind of popped to me that I was looking forward to. He did not have, he did much better than than I expected. I thought he was kind of a more zone corner, but I think that kind of established him with really good workouts all around, really good drills from all reports. I think Martin Emerson's a guy that could move into round 2, early round 3 consideration.
Yeah, I mean, he had a really good day at his pro day, like you said. 2 guys for me. One was today that stuck out. I'll hit this first because it's a big school guy. Guy we've talked about a lot before. I think very versatile defensive back, Alante Taylor, Tennessee. Only ran the 40 at the combine, but at his pro day today, 39-inch vertical, Shane, 11'1" on the broad. That upped his I don't know if he did the shuttles. That wasn't reported, so that his RAS may come down if that was the case. But now at a 9.99 RAS for Alante Taylor with those jumps.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy that has been impressive through every step of this process. Like, I think you watch him and you're like, you can kind of nitpick. There are things that could be problems in the NFL, but man, I mean, he's big, he's athletic, he's long. Yeah, he's probably teetering on my top 10 corners at this point.
Yeah, I think his floor now is probably the 3rd round. I think he's pretty much going to not slip past that. But the one guy I wanted to say that I had never heard of the guy, never knew his name before the other day. Tyshawn James, wide receiver, Central Connecticut State. 6'2", 216, 4'4", 940, 37.5-inch vertical, 10'11" broad jump, 9.53 RAS for Central Connecticut State. I believe they are the Blue Demons.
Oh, that sounds right. I feel
that sounds right.
Some NCAA tournaments of
that sounds right. Some sort of demon, I believe. Isn't that where the quarterback a few years ago that Scott liked so much? Dolagala. I think that's where he played.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Bengals legend, Jake Dolagala. But yeah, so I thought that was just a name I wanted to throw out there for the peeps. So when your team signs him as an undrafted free agent, you heard his name on this podcast first. Tyshawn
Blue
James.
Blue Devils.
So, I was close.
That was good. I give you half a point for that.
I had blue. I had blue. All right, Shane, we've got some questions. So we're going to we got a couple of Twitter questions. We're going to hit we'll hit the question in the chat first because I think it's the easiest. Well, I'll say the easiest one to answer. Who Dallas taking at 24? Chris Lopez on Facebook asked.
Man, I wish that was easy. Like I wish I knew, because I do think they have some options from defensive line to offensive line. I actually think it's a decent spot for Tyler Linderbaum, for them to take him, as if he's following at that point. They have not been shy about taking guys that are under 300 pounds. You can play center or guard for them. They do run a little more of that zone blocking. I think it would be a really nice fit, so I'll go with that.
They do have a glaring hole at safety, and that's kind of where I went in my last mock draft. With I was debating between Lewis Seen, Georgia, and Daxton Hill, Michigan. Went with Lewis Seen just because I think he's better.
Yeah, I mean they yeah, true. They did get Jaron Curse back. They signed Malik Hooker, but I don't know if either of those guys are, if you can get Lewis Seen, I think it'd be a nice addition. So I'm with you.
All right, a couple of Twitter questions here. I'll get to the serious one first. we'll do the one that's not so serious. At Andrew Nordmeyer on Twitter asks, talk about a trade you would like to see happen at the draft. Had some huge ones so far this offseason. What is the one trade you want to see during? We'll narrow it down to day one, first day of the draft.
Day one, I want to see. I'll go with this. Green Bay Packers trade both their first round picks to move up to number 11, Washington Commanders, so they can select Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. That's what I want to see happen. I want to see the Packers make a big move. I think they're going to make a big move at some point to go get an elite pass catcher finally. Here's what's probably going to happen. They're probably going to move up and take an offensive tackle. That's what it'll be. We'll be like, oh man,
they give up 2 1s to move up for Trevor Penning.
Yeah, right. They're like, come on, man.
And we love Trevor Penning,
yeah,
so we wouldn't fault them for it. But Packer fans might lose their minds. The trade that I want to see happen during draft night: Carolina Panthers on the clock at 6. Logo changes to the Pittsburgh Steelers to come up to get Malik Willis. I want to see anarchy on our live. I want to see a Bruce Irvin level meltdown from Shane P. Hallam on the Draft Countdown live stream when Pittsburgh gives up 3 number 1s to move up to draft Malik Willis.
Oh my God, it would happen. I put the odds of that as very, 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 very slim. But if it happens, I'll never say never. So oh my God.
All right, last question, Shane, from at Viday01 Toxic Mike asks, if Patrick Mahomes were a muffin, what kind of muffin would he be?
I know the correct answer, so I'm going to let you answer first.
I have no idea. I'm not very versed on muffins.
I know what the right answer is.
What is the right answer?
Brian, it's a stud muffin. This is a classic Draft Countdown form joke here, but throwback to 2009. So
okay. See. I have as a father of a 6-year-old, I am not good at the dad jokes as I should be.
Well, yeah, come on.
This feels like a dad joke.
It is. It's a good one.
That's good stuff. Good stud muffin, which is true.
It's just true.
That's good stuff. All right. Final thoughts, Shane. You've got the 7-round mock draft coming up. Talk about the article you got coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday I have an article, The Curious Case of Jalen Weidermeyer, where I have to eat a heck of a lot of crow for what's happened this offseason with him and his fall from grace and what happened. When I first noticed him and what I caught and why I thought he was going to be, a future NFL first-round pick and what's happened since. So definitely interested at Jalen Weidermeyer, tight end, Texas A&M, who had the horrible pro day. So we'll be getting into that on Sunday if you want to come check it out.
I'm still continuing through, probably got 10 more of these individual team mock drafts, and then we'll have made it through all 32 teams in the NFL. So that's going on over the next week and a half. But also, Shane, I'm joining you a week from Monday. I'm going to do a 7-round mock draft. Never done this before.
Wow.
But I'm going to do it under the guise of this is how I would draft it in a 7-round mock draft. Not what I think teams are going to do, but what I think teams should do. How I would draft a 7-round mock draft. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, Shane. I'm going to use a simulator there to go. I'm going to make each individual pick. I'm going to use the one I'm going to use Denny's over at NFL Mock Draft Database. to do it, but I will pick for every single team. But it's going to be I'm gonna stack my board up, and that's how I'm gonna do it. 7 rounds. Probably not gonna get much analysis from that one, but it will be. I will go 7 rounds deep, and that will be a week from Monday. That is on April the. Let's see. That will be April the 14th. No, hold.
April.
Wrong month.
11th.
April 11th. Look forward to that. And then,
you better put a big, bold, underline disclaimer.
Oh, yes.
You're going to get.
Matter of fact, that might be in the title.
Yeah, that's a good
7-round mock draft. How Brian Bosarge would do it.
No, I'm excited for that, man. That is a step, and maybe you'll get addicted like me and never go back.
It may never happen again, Shane. I might get halfway through the 3rd round and realize this was a huge mistake.
Yes, fair enough.
But so yeah, I'm looking forward to that 7-round mock draft on what I would do. But Shane, that's going to do it. If you've come across us on YouTube tonight and you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. Hit the notification bell and like the videos. That way we can get this out, get this algorithmed up a little bit, and get us out there to more people. You can download this on audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, pretty much everything else. Give us a 5-star rating on those. Give us a thumbs up, whatever it is that your podcast outlet lets you do. You do that. Follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. Follow Draft Countdown on Twitter at Draft Countdown. Until next time, everybody, draftcountdown.com is where it's at. Later.